Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Gee, the lights are bright up here, aren't they? My name is Stephen Keller. I'm the Chief of Special Initiatives with the DPS Office of Electricity, Gas, and Water. When I started my preparations for this morning's welcome, I asked myself the most obvious question, which is there any good CHP humor out there? And there is none. There's nothing. I went out on the internet, I searched it. There's none. Surprisingly, there's also no good standby rates humor. So, I just don't know, if you're expecting that, it's just not going to happen today, okay? So I guess I'm going to have to play it pretty straight here. As an engineer, I generally think in terms of, can we do it better? Can we do it better? The same question exists in the regulatory frame itself, where we want to know if we can make the regulatory structure work better, be more streamlined, fair, less onerous on the people that have to deal with it, while also providing reasonable protections to the general body of ratepayers. That's why we're here today. I'd like to welcome our attendees in the room, our attendees who are watching the webinar, and welcome then to the 2013 DPS CHP Technical Conference. I'd also like to welcome our speakers and panelists, all experts in the field of CHP, and thank them for helping us today to explore the regulatory issues in front of us. We're looking for a frank and open discussion, yet collegial, to look at the regulatory structure and its impact on the CHP community. We'll hear from NYState regarding their CHP programs designed to not only build CHP, but also to move and develop the market itself. We'll hear about the interplay of CHP and the Department of Environmental Conservation's regulations. We'll hear about CHP in the context of New York City's long-term plans. The Public Service Commission has produced a number of CHP decisions over the years, favorable decisions, ranging from the Burstone ruling quite a while ago to the recent ruling on CHP in multiple buildings and campus-style settings. We'll discuss those type of rulings too. Finally, we'll explore the utility CHP developer interface and finish up discussing next steps. I want to thank Dana Levy of NYState for all the great insight and help he's given us putting this together, and I'd especially like to acknowledge the support of NYState in bringing this from a thought on the drawing board to today's reality. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the insight and diligent work put into this effort by John Roberts over here, who works for me. He's done a great job, as well as everybody who's been working behind the scenes, such as Tom Bourgeois and Tim Benak from Pace Energy Center. Without all these people, it wouldn't have happened today. Some logistics, and this is for us as well as the people that are online. We are probably going to move lunch up to 12 o'clock from 12:15. Sometimes the words just don't come out right, but 12:15 moving to 12. All times on the schedule are, close. They're approximations, but we're going to try to stick as best as we can with this one change of moving lunch and whatever follows up about 15 minutes. Some just general kind of logistical announcements here. Please make sure that you turn off or put your cell phone on vibrate. You don't want to be the person that everyone's looking at when it goes off. I know that actually I have to do that too. I'm usually the person they look at. Bathrooms are to the left, I think 2 lefts. What else? Like I said, we're being webcast, so when you come up for a Q&A, we have 2 microphones. Please wait until you get to the microphones and speak clearly so that people that are out there on the internet can hear the questions as well as the answers. Finally, we have 2 U.S. clean heat and power champions with us today. Power champions, did I say that? And they are Katrina Pielli of the U.S. DOE, seated over there. Raise your hand. There she is. And also Dana Levy of NYState over here. Many of you know Dana well. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Gary Brown, the chairman of the New York State Public Service Commission. Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning. A rabbi, a priest, and a lawyer go to Con Ed to negotiate a backup rate. It's a start, okay? I'd like to thank everybody, the staff that's really worked very, very hard, and also NYState for organizing what is, I think, a very timely conference at this point. I think combined heat and power is, people keep using the phrase disruptive technologies, meaning technologies that may kind of disrupt the way electric service is normally provided, change things, and I think the time is ripe, which I think is very interesting. I'm just going to tell a little personal story here. In 1978, I was hired by the State Energy Office to do energy stuff, and it really was at that point energy stuff, because up and through the 70s, we just, burned oil, and as Dana Carvey used to say, we liked it. We didn't worry about it, and then all of a sudden, world events made us think for the first time about energy, and in New York, the State Energy Office got formed, but there's really nobody with energy experience, which was great for those of us starting out, because we had an opportunity to get a job. And the first thing I was asked to do, first day I was asked, Jeff Cohen over here, who's now my assistant, was my boss then. He didn't ask me this, but another person asked me to find out what in the world this cogeneration was that was in PURPA, because nobody had ever heard of the term, cogeneration. And so basically we found out it was combined heat and power. I still remember the definition in the state law to the day. It talked about the simultaneous production of heat and thermal energy, and I had a very wise engineer tell me that's impossible. It's the sequential production of heat and energy. So I still remember that little physics lessons along the way too. But combined heat and power, unfortunately, that experience turned into PURPA machines. It really didn't turn into the widespread use of CHP. But I think we're at a point where the technologies, the fuel prices, the rules are all starting to line up to make a big difference in combined heat and power. One of the reasons, and John Roberts approached me one day in an elevator and wanted to, he told me, we need to have a conference. We need to get everybody together on combined heat and power. And to me, one of the great values is to find out what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. I know just by its nature, one of the things we found out very early, for example, was that interconnection rules, standby rates, were completely different every utility you went to, which must be very frustrating for project developers to have to learn the rules all over again every time. So we've been trying to look at how we can standardize where appropriate. Sometimes the rules need to be different. Where we are here in Manhattan is considerably different than a combined heat and power facility somewhere upstate New York in a rural area. So combined heat and power continues to be a critical component of our energy efficiency efforts. And in the end, that's what it is. We're trying to, this is another one of our energy efficiency programs. We're trying to use fuels to maximize their effectiveness and efficiency. We made it easier last October for Con Ed customers to install combined heat and power on their premises, be allowed to offset the output of that generation against the customer's building usage in multiple buildings. That's an example of trying to apply it in New York City, where you've got such density of buildings, and trying to think about each building as its own unit probably doesn't make as much sense as to thinking about combinations of buildings and setting up central heat and power district. Show our support last December. NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research Development Authority, requested to reallocate $58.6 million in funds to their combined heat and power program, and we approved that. So there are considerably more monies for assistance in projects than existed before. And what an appropriate place to have this meeting today. And I don't know if that was planned this way or was purely a coincidence, but during Superstorm Sandy, NYU, New York University, has a cogeneration plant, usually connected to the grid, selling to the grid, make steam for the system, sell electricity back and forth. But when the system went down in Hurricane Sandy, the system went into island mode, and this area, this campus, was a bastion of light in the darkness as their combined heat and power system and what now is being referred to as microgrids, another term that's being thrown around a lot, their microgrid kept the power up. Governor Cuomo had set up a New York State 2100 commission, and its name kind of describes what the commission was supposed to do. It was supposed to look into the future. What are ways that we can, if these storms of the century, which we've had 3 of in New York in 2 years, are going to be part of a regular landscape, how do we become more resilient? How do we build a grid of the future that's going to be more resilient? And one of those recommendations was to expand the use of distributed generation and combined heat and power. And here at NYU really proved to be one of the great examples of what can happen. And when you think about critical facilities, hospitals, and as we found out in the last storm, gas stations, petroleum refineries, to be able to know that some of these can stay up and running, government facilities during times of outages can really make things much smoother for the citizens who have to endure the outings and make us more resilient and get the system back up quicker. So there are some tremendous opportunities for combined heat and power if you start thinking just a little bit bigger than a building by building type analysis. We've got a great set of speakers today. I want to thank everybody who came in the room and everybody out there in the world of the internet that's watching us. I know there's at least 60 or so people that signed up to watch on the internet, so we'd even have a more crowded room if we, in the old days, if we had to have everybody in person. I want to thank Katrina Piale, Senior Policy Advisor of the Office of Energy Efficiency Renewable Energy, who will be our luncheon keynote speaker, and she's going to talk a little bit about what the federal government, which I know has a very active role in CHP, so we'll get a little bit of that perspective. So I look forward today to these discussions. I'm going to stick the day. Even if I didn't want to, Steve made me the farewell speaker as well, so I don't have a choice. But no, I do want to be here, and I do want to get a feel. I think it's really good to spend a day kind of immersed in an issue. In my job, you tend to multitask a lot, and it's good to spend a day just kind of focusing on the issues related to a single topic, combined heat and power. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Let's make this highly interactive. That is the goal. We got some great speakers who who you can learn from, but I think we can also learn, especially those of you that are out in the communities trying to make this happen, how we can make this all work better for all of us. So, good morning, and enjoy the conference. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're already behind on our slides here. So right now, as you can see, we're going to welcome from NYSerta Dr. Dana Levy and Brian Platt to discuss, among other things, NYSerta's programs.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to follow Chairman Brown here at the podium. On behalf of NYSerta, I'd like to also introduce my colleague Brian Platt. Brian and I will do a tag team presentation this morning to highlight NYSerta's programs that support combined heat and power. I want to start first by highlighting the market potential for combined heat and power here in New York, and I have a few statistics here. The first showing that combined heat and power is actually an existing, large, important resource in New York State, with over 5,500 megawatts of installed capacity here in the state. That's a significant amount when you compare it to the New York State peak load. There certainly is a very significant amount of combined heat and power already established in the state. Furthermore, we see that there's a market potential for an additional 8,500 megawatts of CHP. So 5,500 plus an additional 8,500 means that there really is a market potential total for 14,000 megawatts of CHP in New York State. These numbers are additive, what's existing plus what additional can be built. And in comparison to the peak load in New York, we can see that CHP really is a significant opportunity for the state. NYSerta has a suite of programs that look to address the entire continuum along the chain of innovation. From initial early scientific research all the way through to commercialization of technologies. And for CHP, we have 3 specific links in the chain that we're trying to address at this point in time. The programs that we run at NYSerta for CHP, there are two programs. Brian Platt and his team have a program, and myself and my team, we have a program. And we can see here from the slide that the 2 programs are intended to cover these 3 links within the chain. I'm going to talk about the programs in my group, and then Brian will talk about the program in his group. These 2 programs are intended to address what we see as the full continuum of CHP, small to medium and medium to large systems, and we've got the programs crafted in a way to try to address the needs of those specific size ranges. These lists are not intended to be all-encompassing, but there's certainly names of equipment vendors that come to mind when you start thinking small to medium, and names of equipment vendors that come to mind when you start thinking medium to large. This shows that the equipment vendors themselves really cluster into these 2 different size ranges, and the programs are tailored to try to address the needs of those vendors in those size ranges. Overall, the combined programs are intended to address these objectives. We certainly want to accelerate the uptake of CHP in New York State. We want to simplify how CHP gets built. We want to push the markets to higher levels of efficiency and environmental performance. We want clean, efficient, robust CHP systems. And we want to improve the resiliency of New York State. All of the CHP projects that are eligible to receive funding must be able to run during a grid outage. That's a huge benefit. Together with our partners at the New York State Department of Public Service, NYSERDA has established this particular approach. We want to assist CHP feasibility studies, provide financial incentives to install CHP equipment. We want to emphasize the value specifically of citing CHP at critical facilities. As I said, all of the CHP systems must be capable of running during a grid outage in order to receive financial incentives from NYSERDA. The program in my group has $20 million available to support CHP systems, and we're trying to address these two specific links in the chain with this particular program. As announced by Governor Cuomo, the $20 million became available starting in February. We're thrilled to have this type of support from the governor and the administration, all the way from the governor to the staff that run the program. The entire chain of command is fully engaged in supporting CHP for New York. So Pond 2568, it's now open. This has $20 million to install CHP systems. This is for the small to medium-sized equipment from 50 kilowatts to 1.3 megawatts, that size range. And we're focusing on pre-qualified modular kit-based CHP systems. Recently, we noticed that the marketplace was going in this direction, and we've crafted this program to specifically support the direction that the marketplace has been going. I did a quick Google search of CHP systems and looking at the websites of the equipment vendors in their own words, they were describing the systems as being modular, prefabricated, kit-like, and some going as far as calling them plug and play. This is where the marketplace is going in this size range, and the Pond 2568 funding opportunity is designed specifically to leverage that trend. So at NYSERDA, we created a catalog. We invited the equipment vendors to provide their catalog cut sheets so that we could review the equipment to make sure that it was durable, reliable, quality equipment, to make sure that the interface between the equipment and the electric grid would meet the needs of the utility. We actually had utility representatives help us look at these catalog cut sheets to make sure that the interface would be something that would satisfy their criteria. So having gotten past that particular hurdle, that takes one challenge off of the table, and we can focus on actually sizing the equipment correctly for the needs of the site. And we've gotten beyond the concern of whether the equipment could function in harmony with the grid and whether the equipment would function in harmony between all of the components within the box, between the prime mover engine, between the heat recovery system, between the controls. All of those components within the box are designed to work in harmony with each other. And through our diligent review, looking at previous experiences of that equipment, we've come to the conclusion for the equipment that we've admitted into the catalog that we have confidence that that equipment should function correctly. This is really a first for NYSERDA to actually pre-approve a packaged system of CHP and to designate our pre-approval that those particular systems are meritorious for receiving NYSERDA incentive funding. And here's the catalog. It's open and available through the end of 2016. We will be updating this catalog periodically as additional vendors provide us their catalog cut sheets, and we have a number of catalog cut sheets that are actually under review right now, so this will be a living document. The catalog has a sizing guideline which establishes a streamlined approach. We've come up with very conservative sizing guidelines that systems that are sized in accordance with these guidelines will receive a streamlined review at NYSERDA. But we also have a mechanism that should a site request a CHP system larger than recommended by these sizing guidelines, we'll do a case-by-case review to see whether that particular size makes sense. And here's the catalog listing. As you can see, we've got 8 different vendors that are currently in the catalog, representing 36 different systems from those 8 vendors. We can see that there are sizes spanning all the way from the 50 kilowatt starting range to the 1.3 megawatt concluding range, with a large cluster at this point in time on the smaller end of the scale. However, there is something for everybody throughout the entire size range. Of the 8 vendors that are currently listed in the catalog, I know some of them are represented here. I'd like to take the opportunity now to invite any of the equipment vendors that are in the catalog, if you're here, to please rise for a moment and be recognized. This is a great opportunity to highlight our partners in this process. Without these equipment vendors packaging up the systems and offering them in this manner, we'd not be able to offer the program in this format. So I want to thank you all for attending today and for all of your partnership with this program. Thank you very much. I'm going to quickly flip through a catalog cut sheet for each of the vendors, and I've circled here a highlight point that I want to show. As you can see, the funding amounts for a particular module are specified in the catalog. In the upstate area, there's a funding rebate assigned to the item, and in the downstate area, there's also a different funding rebate. We see that the rebates downstate are about 20% or so more lucrative than the rebates upstate. We're trying to drive participation downstate. These catalog cut sheets are 2 pages. There's one page that highlights the equipment itself with its specifications, and another page with a one-line diagram showing the equipment. As you can see on this page, I'm highlighting the point of interface between the equipment and the utility. This is something that the utility folks who helped us review these catalog cut sheets felt comfortable that that would be an acceptable point of interface. So we've cleared that hurdle on behalf of all of the customers. We see that in addition to the prime mover, there's also I believe this is a heat recovery point here, and the heat exchanger for this particular system is sized properly to meet the needs of the equipment throughout the entire year under all different conditions. So part of our review was to make sure that the heat exchanger and heat recovery system is properly sized. The vendors each had an opportunity to provide a statement of their qualifications and experience. There's a point of contact for each vendor highlighted in the catalog. This is a mechanism to steer customers to the right point of contact when they see an item in the catalog they want to pursue. This here highlights the size of the equipment and the number of modules, prime movers within it. We have an N+1 opportunity if a site is appropriately sized for say a 200 kW system. We would allow them to put in an N+1 installation that would have a pair of 200 kW prime movers, and that way they could alternate back and forth. During 1 week, perhaps they would use one of the prime movers as the operating system while the other was idle, and then in the next week they could toggle and use the other. This way they minimize the run hours on each piece of equipment and extend the life of the equipment. Furthermore, it provides additional resiliency. Should one of the prime movers be down for maintenance during a moment when the grid outage occurs, the other prime mover would be available, and therefore this N+1 feature increases the resiliency and reliability. Furthermore, the CHP system might be sized properly for 200 kW to meet the efficiency needs of the site, but there may be times during a grid outage where 200 kW might not be sufficient to run the components of the building that would be desired to run during a grid outage, and therefore with the N+1 having a pair of 200 kW prime movers, the site could actually produce 400 kW during the grid outage. This section of the catalog shows the performance of the system under varying conditions of temperature throughout the different parts of the season and its performance. We've also got footprint size equipment. Sometimes these equipments come on multiple skids, and depending on the size of the skids and the arrangement, you may put the two skids side by side and have a particular footprint, or you might put them end to end and have a different footprint. So this information shows the different arrangements and what the footprint sizes might be, as well as the largest particular skid, so that you can be sure that your rigging can get it through the doorway, as well as the heaviest individual skid, so you can be sure that your rigging and freight elevator can handle the delivery. We've got catalog ID numbers assigned to each of these. We're trying to give the emphasis that these really are packaged catalog type based systems. And when you specify a particular catalog ID number, you get the same thing each time. We've also got information for the site owners within the catalog, and we highlight things that they should consider. First, I want to point out here this item number 2 for a site owner that may be approached by multiple catalog vendors and is trying to compare the different deals being offered. They can turn to a trusted advisor, an independent third party that can advise them on the different deals that they might be facing. The Northeast Clean Energy Application Center, I'd like to recognize the folks from the Clean Energy Application Center. If you're here, please stand and be noticed. I'd also like to congratulate and applaud the U.S. Department of Energy, Katrina, for being our partner in supporting the application center. This has been a fantastic program from the federal government, and we really appreciate it. I'd also like to highlight here number 5 that we want folks to approach the catalog really when they have a shovel-ready project and they're ready to go, but not so late that they've already demonstrated a commitment to go forward with or without the incentive. And therefore, we want folks to approach the catalog before it's too late, before the equipment has been shipped to the site or a staging area. In partnership with our colleagues from Con Edison has established these CHP targeted zones. There's a targeted zone in each of the boroughs, and these zones are areas where Con Ed has identified that CHP would be beneficial to the circuitry in those neighborhoods, and NYSERDA is offering bonus incentives to try to drive participation in those specific zone areas. In addition to the 10% bonus if you're in a Con Ed targeted zone, there's also an additional NYSERDA 10% bonus incentive if the site is a facility of refuge enrolled with the Red Cross or the County Emergency Planning Committee to serve as an evacuation shelter and be pressed into service in times of need, where the CHP system could run during a grid outage and serve the particular portion of the building that would be used to house these evacuated population. The application for the program is one piece of paper, double-sided. We're trying to streamline this. Rather simple piece of paper, plus these additional attachments, a financial plan. Obviously, a vendor trying to sell a CHP system to a customer needs to have a plan for how it will be financed. That could certainly be as simple as a letter of credit from a bank, a statement that the vendor would be engaging in a power purchase agreement with the site, and the vendor has access to funding to build the system. The financing plan doesn't have to be overwhelming. We also want a schedule that shows that the system can be built quickly, maximum 12 months. list of necessary permits. We want to show that the team knows what they're doing and they're ready to proceed properly and quickly. We want to see that they've already engaged with the utility to do a scoping of the electrical interconnection, that they're aware that there is sufficient gas at the site. And if the system is larger than would be recommended by our sizing guidelines, then in addition, a feasibility study that gives us comfort that the system is not oversized. Once the system's been built and it's operated for at least 1 year, but not more than 2 years, so during its sophomore year of operation, we will do a recommissioning at NYSERDA's expense, at no expense to the site. We will send our recommissioning agent to come inspect the system, look at the original design basis, look at its performance, and offer recommendations for further improvement. We think that by providing that feedback to the vendor and the site, that worthwhile improvements would then be embraced. We see this overall program as a win-win-win-win-win opportunity. For the customer gets confidence that the equipment has already been vetted and given NYSERDA's seal of approval. The developer has transparency. They know the available incentive. They know that NYSERDA has already pre-approved the particular piece of equipment that they're interested in installing. The equipment vendor gets a marketing edge. They can claim that they are pre-approved in the catalog, and in fact, only the vendors that are in the catalog for this size range of 50 kW to 1.3 megawatts, only the vendors that are approved in the catalog can get the incentive funds. The authorities having jurisdiction will get greater comfort, having the opportunity to see a standard system being installed time and time again gives them greater comfort. And we heard from some of the authorities having jurisdiction that over the last decade, they've seen 100 different CHP systems installed, and in their words, each one looked like somebody's crazy science experiment, and they needed to really evaluate and dig into the design of each and every one of those CHP systems. By having this standardization, the authorities having jurisdiction will see similar, repetitive, standardized designs, and once they've kicked the tires once or twice on these, they should feel more comfortable, and we expect, and the authorities having jurisdiction have indicated that they will gain familiarity and comfort as time goes on, and the subsequent installations will benefit from that. And finally, for NYSERDA and our colleagues at the Department of Public Service and the Public Service Commission, who has provided the funds to support this program, we will get acceleration of uptake of CHP, which is something good for all of us. And thank you. At this point, I'll turn the podium over to Brian Platt. Brian?
Good morning. It's nice to see a full room of people who all want to hear about and talk about CHP. It's something that makes Dana and I very happy, especially people that can get here at 8:30 in the morning in New York City. That's even much more impressive. So thank you all for showing up. I'm going to speak about the program that funds projects 1.3 megawatts and above. That program primarily focuses on market development, market adoption, market expansion of those types of projects. Not really so much focused on the modular type aspects that Dana was speaking about. Hopefully I have the proper forward button, yes. Much analysis and thought went into the proper place to find funding for this program, as well as the proper program to actually approve and move forward with. But we have done that, and on May 2nd, Governor Cuomo announced the opening of this program. And so we're very glad to be open here by the time we got to this workshop today. And we're looking forward to everybody here participating in the program and asking us any questions you like and so forth today and going forward. So what is this program? 1.3 megawatts and above projects. It primarily focuses on having projects that both meet energy requirements, demand requirements, fuel conversion efficiency requirements, environmental performance requirements. Our payments are based on actually projects meeting those requirements. It's all focused on clean, efficient, gas-fired CHP right now. There's also further resiliency requirements within the program that it has to operate during grid outages, and the projects that are installed have to be flood resistant. All payments are based on a rigorous 2-year M&V period for all of the energy, demand, efficiency, and environmental performance that I mentioned. Additional parts of the program design are we'll have an engineering study to support the project when it comes in for an application. The payments are actually based on kilowatt hours and kilowatts guaranteed to be delivered. We have certain payments per kilowatt hours per year and per kilowatt with a $2 million cap, but you'll also see that we have some 10% bonus incentives similar to what Dana described too that can bring us above the $2 million cap. In addition, the fuel conversion efficiency has to meet at least 60%, and we have exhaust emission requirements on NOx as well that have to be met in order to get paid. This 2-year M&V we take quite seriously. The project has to be commissioned to meet the requirements before it goes into the 2-year M&V period, and then at each year of the M&V period, we review that to decide what payments to make on the payment stream that we give out to the projects over the 2 years. There are bonus incentives. An additional 10% can get added to the projects if they, Dana mentioned that we're working with Con Edison on certain zones and certain areas that are peak demand challenged, and we can give 10% bonuses for projects that are installed in time in those areas. And if you look forward, this program is supposed to be in place all the way through 2016, I believe. And we will be, going forward, looking at additional things and additional zones that are maybe peak demand challenged Con Edison, and be working with the other utilities as well. So other opportunities may come up in the future. There is bonus incentives up to 10% if people exceed our 60% minimum fuel conversion efficiency, and that is, again, metered and verified over 2 years that they have to do it. And also if facilities are installed at critical infrastructure, or CHP systems are installed at critical infrastructure facilities, including facilities of refuge. But we have a list in the program of additional critical facilities that we will give the bonus incentive for. That's about it for that program. You can find the 2 programs at these 2 locations at the NYState website. That's where you find our funding opportunities for all of our programs, and those are the links. And at this point, Dana and I will take any questions that you have. For as long as Steve wants to let us have time to have questions.
1, 2? Okay, this is a very important part of our program, so there will be time. So if anybody does have a question or questions, please come up to either that microphone or this microphone and ask them.
I'm Reuben Brown from the E-Cube Company and chairman of the Regulatory Committee for NYState, the Northeast Clean Heat Power Initiative. You mentioned the potential, technical potential, Dana, and we've done numbers recently that analyzed the bandwidth between 100 kilowatts and 50 megawatts of the existing capability, and that data is available to you on the technical potential. But the reason we did this analysis was to ascertain how many CHP systems were in existence before the New York ISO came into being in January of 2000, and how much since then. And it turns out that we have a historic CHP capability of, let's say, 500 megawatts in that range, or maybe 450. And together, we now have about 800 megawatts of CHP capability. Could you comment on the relationship of the CHP you see in these programs to the wholesale market demand response issues, and is demand response a factor in your decision making?
That's a good question. Is this on? Yeah. We don't require that, or up until now, we have not required, and at this point, we're not requiring that CHP systems participate in emergency demand response or demand response programs. But we have seen a number of projects, a few projects that have done so over the years. One thing that we think this N+1 capability of the CHP systems within the catalog can provide is essentially reserved capacity that could be bid into the demand response programs. The idea of allowing folks to put in an N+1 system, we expect that they'll run the right size system to be efficient on regular days, and there may be moments where they run the N+1, the full system, which may exceed their thermal needs at the moment, and they may have some thermal energy that they waste for a few hours here and there. But the extra electricity could be highly valuable either through a demand response participation or during a grid outage to provide enough electricity to run and deal with the inrush current of starting an elevator motor or a refrigeration system or water transfer pumps that would pump water up to the storage tanks on the roof of the building. So we see value in that and the opportunity to harness that for demand response as well as part of the thinking. Thanks.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. My name is Herbert Dwyer. I'm from ASI Energy. I have a question on remote net metering. Two of the larger projects that we're working on, we've hit some issues, and one of the big easy solutions would be to allow a CHP facility to remote net meter. Are there any plans to allow the larger systems to remote net meter as you can with solar?
Well, it's really not our call. It's more with the Public Service Commission and DPS to make those decisions. Certainly, if it became allowed, then we would allow it in our programs. But
does NYState have any plans to work with the PSC in developing such a program?
It's possible that might actually require legislation to extend remote net metering to CHP as a technology class. And our understanding is that there's a case pending right now with the Commission for remote net metering of a solar system at Cornell. It's unclear yet how that will unfold, and we expect that a greater look at remote net metering will unfold as a result of that particular issue. So we'll see how that unfolds and then what else needs to be done beyond there.
Okay, thank you.
it's certainly a good topic that you brought up, and the point of today's workshop is to get these issues out there so that we can all work on them in the future.
Maybe be part of the solution.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, Jim Bride, Energy Tariff Experts. And the question I have for most people who are familiar with Con Ed's dual fuel program for gas and oil customers, the coldest days of the year, there's not enough gas to serve the entire system load. Is there a discussion with this program design around the coldest days of the year, adequate gas supply for parts of New York City that are constrained presently, when it's 0 degrees out? And is that a potential constraint that you've come across regarding actual supply of gas to certain customers based on where they are on the gas grid?
So with the CHP catalog program, one of the components of the application to enter the program includes documentation that the project has discussed the availability of gas with the utility. And we would leave it to the project team to feel comfortable that the sizing of the CHP system and its economic dispatch throughout the entire year is economically feasible for them based on the available gas. So knowledge is power. Knowing how much gas enables the site to determine whether the project is feasible for them. Great, thank you. It looks like that might be our final question for this session. Thank you all.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Brian and Dana, for all that good information you've provided. I just wanted to let you know that PSC jurisdictional regulatory issues will be discussed, developed a little bit more during the first panel. So if you have questions, such as the remote net metering question, things of that nature can be brought up there. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Mr. John Barnes from the Department of Environmental Conservation. John's been there a long time. I've worked with him for a good number of years. John? Okay.
That would be easier. Good morning, and thank you, Steve, for the invitation to speak here. Whereas NYSERDA is the agency that is encouraging the deployment of CHP, DEC's really serves a couple roles. One, we're the agency that's going to take credit for that work. And at the same time, well, considering the fact that we're a regulatory agency, and my division's primary goal is to develop a strategy to bring the state into attainment with the EPA's National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We're also the regulation or the organization that can hinder the development of CHP. Okay, in this presentation, I'm just going to give an overview of the regulations that would apply to CHP applications in the state, and basically concentrate on the regulations that apply to a given facility. I'll start with the permitting requirements. Each of these units will have to be permitted, and the permit type that you have will dictate which regulations apply. There are some regulations that apply in a general sense throughout the state, primarily the fuel sulfur rule, which was recently revised. Major facilities are subject to a Title V permit, which needs not only DEC but EPA approval. Minor facilities that will be subject to a new rule probably in 2014. It's a rule that's been under development since 2001, so 2014 may be optimistic. I'm getting trying to disassociate my name with that rule, but that's not possible. And finally, I'll talk about some of the federal regulations. The permitting for CHP, the type of permits you would need, would depend on your potential NOx emissions, nitrogen oxide emissions. And that's basically calculated with operating a given source at its design capability for each hour of the year. And this is not only just for each individual source, but it's all of your combustion sources at a facility. That also includes emergency generators. In New York City, the threshold is 25 tons per year or more. It would subject you to the Title V requirements. Upstate, it's 100 tons per year. Title V permits have a 5-year term that, for a CHP application, will probably run from about 10 to 40 pages, depending on the complexity of actions at your facility. It's subject to public comment, actually twice, both by the DEC and by the EPA. And the fees that I'll be talking about for these permits is something which is set by the legislature, range from $45 to $65 per ton. Facilities with with emission rates over 6,000 tons would have to pay the $65 fee. For most CHP applications, I would guess the fee would be $45 if you're subject to Title V. State facility permits, at least the new ones or the modified ones, would be subject to a 10-year term. This is a new provision. We revised the permitting rule, Part 201, last year. Now, in order to be subject to a Title V permit, either have to have your emissions naturally below the Title V threshold, or you have to agree to some sort of a cap. For example, limiting the hours of operation of a source to keep your emissions, potential emissions, below the Title V level. Also in the revision in 2001, there's a provision for considering toxic compounds that are coming from your unit that's in subpart 201-9. Looking over the thresholds for most CHP applications, I doubt this will be an issue, but it's something you have to just double check on. The fees are $100 to $2,000 per source, and the threshold, if it's 50 million BTUs an hour or greater, it's a $2,000 fee. The state facility permits, again, will probably run about 10 to 15 pages. The registration certificates is a one-page document. There's no conditions in it. And these are for sources where your emissions are 1/2 of the Title V threshold, and the fees are identical. And it's, again, a 10-year term for new and modified sources. A year or two ago, I think it was last year, we revised the fuel sulfur regulation. This applies only to oil-fired units, natural gas units. There's no sulfur or PM standard. Beginning July of next year, you would have to purchase oil that complies with the standard for distillate to be 15 parts per million sulfur. Beginning in 2016, you have to use compliant sulfur. Now, for most CHP applications, if you use oil and you have a small tank, this shouldn't be an issue. This is an issue for the large central station power plants that have large residual oil tank storage capability. The particulate matter standard applies, again, just to oil-fired units. I'm tossing the standard out now. This is probably going to be revised. The threshold, the 250 million BTU per hour threshold, may be lowered through a rulemaking over the next year or so. And when you look at the distributed generation rule, which I'll talk about in a little bit, this is a standard that would apply to all oil-fired units that are subject to that rule. Now for this is not really the rule that will most adversely impact CHP applications. This applies to existing engines out there, as well as turbines. We also have standards for turbines, but I didn't include those in this slide. Beginning of July of next year, engines at Title V facilities that at least are subject to Title V because of NOx would need to meet standards of 1.5 grams per brake horsepower hour for natural gas, 2.3 for diesel. If you fired both natural gas and co-fired natural gas and diesel, the diesel standard applies. This is the regulation that could adversely impact some CHP. You have to keep this one in mind. And it applies to facilities that become a new major facility. Again, you go above the Title V threshold, or your Title V facility and that's modified. And for a modified facility, you have a new project and you increase your emissions in the New York City area by 2.5 tons of NOx, or upstate 40. New source review in some way is going to apply to your facility. One of the aspects that could apply is the concept of a lowest achievable emission rate. And whereas in the DG rule, if you're a minor facility, you can purchase an engine from a manufacturer that meets an EPA limit. There would be no emission controls required. If Title V kicks in, you might have to install, for example, a selective catalytic reduction system. So that would certainly adversely affect the cost for a CHP unit. This is a fairly complicated regulation. We have some guidance documents on our website, and there's a link that's there. In the case that you need emission offsets for a project, you can find a list of available offsets at the link at the bottom of this page. Purpose of this slide is just to try to give you an idea of how complicated this process can be. This is for a situation where you're modifying an existing facility. But basically, there's a few decision matrices. Once you have to determine if you have you're a Title V facility. If yes, if your emissions are above certain level, then you're subject to there's two different provisions in subpart 201-6 that you would be subject to, and this flowchart would lead you there. There are 8 such flowcharts on our website. If you have questions, the best thing you can do is to contact the local regional office, the engineer that's assigned to your facility, and talk about what requirements you need to meet. I guess this is the breaking news part of my presentation, and I'll start with the last bullet first. This is a regulation that said it's been in development since 2001, and we're going to hold another stakeholder meeting on June 25th in Albany at the DC office from 9 to 12. I believe we'll announce this in the ENB, but if you're interested in attending that stakeholder meeting, either in person, I believe we'll have some sort of a conference call line set up. Please give me your business card, and I'll send you an email with the invitation and a copy of the draft rule. So I'm sitting down here in the front table. Please see me sometime during this conference, and I'll take a card or add your name to a list, and you'll get an email probably later this week or early next week. Basically, this is a rule that would apply to minor facilities. Those aren't subject to Title V. The thresholds are 200 horsepower down in the New York City area, 400 upstate. And it would apply only to existing units. And the standards are identical to those in the NOx-RAC rule. This applies to those that are units that are operating year-round or that are part of a demand response program sponsored by Con Ed or by the New York ISO. Okay. You can access the air regulations at the link off the first bullet on this slide. All of our air regulations are on that particular web page. If you back up a page, you can find the regulations for petroleum bulk storage if that would affect your facility. But so the air regs are at this first link. We're required under the State Administrative Procedures Act to review and revise regulations typically on a 5-year basis. Okay, we don't quite do it in 5 years, but we do continually, we're continually updating one regulation or another. If you look under the proposed rules link, you'll get an idea what's out there for public comment or which was rules that were just, or the public comment period has closed. We also announce our proposed and adopted regulations in the environmental notice bulletin, and we may also announce a stakeholder meeting via the environmental notice bulletin as well. That's issued every Wednesday, usually by 5 o'clock. If you have any questions on the air regulations, probably the best way to do it is to send an email to the air regs email address at the bottom of this page. Your email will be forwarded to the staff member who's most familiar with the regulation or regulations that you're concerned about, and that person will respond to you directly. Now, going back to the DG rule, it's just for existing sources. We're going to allow the new source performance standards adopted by EPA to apply to new DG sources that are at least subject to the minor source permits. And there's 3 such new source performance standards, or NSPS rules, which were adopted between 2006 and 2008 or 2009. I'm going to talk about the 2 that are highlighted in red. The turbine rule is one that might apply in certain situations where you have a facility that's subject to the EPA boiler mat, which applies to large oil and coal-fired boilers. And one of the one of the compliance options that's been touted for that regulation is replace those coal and oil-fired boilers with a natural gas CHP system. The standards in the turbine rule are both, there are two sets of standards. One's a concentration standard, and they also have an output-based standard. The fourth, or actually the third regulation that I'll talk about is the RICE MACT. RICE stands for Reciprocating Internal Combustion Engine, and it's a rule that deals with the emissions of hazardous air pollutants from engines. Well, it shows up better on the screen than it does on my computer. The standards that apply for the current model years for natural gas-fired engines are shown in the first bullet, and for landfill gas in the second set of bullets. These standards are for engines without the NA control. There are no controls required to meet these standards. For a unit that meets the standard of 1 gram per brake horsepower hour for NOx, any engines that are basically under 2 megawatts would be considered minor sources, assuming you don't have any emergency generators at your facility. Upstate, any engine over 8 megawatts would trigger the Title V. Compliance with these standards is fairly simple as long as you follow the manufacturer's recommendations. These engines are certified as meeting those standards by the manufacturers. So if you operate it and maintain it as the manufacturer recommends, you don't have to do any additional testing. If you don't, then you need to test either once every 3 years or once after every 8,760 hours of operation. You will have to keep records, and you'll have to notify EPA. In essence, you have to notify DEC that you bought this engine, and the threshold here is 500 horsepower. For the diesel-fired engines, the rule's a little bit more complicated, but for the model years that are shown here, these are the standards. And again, the compliance can be fairly simple if you operate the engines as recommended by the manufacturer. Again, you have to keep maintenance records, and this time the notification threshold is 3,000 horsepower. I guess different people wrote the rules. The three NSPS rules that I've just referenced, again, were adopted by EPA. DEC will accept delegation of those regulations, which means we will be the agency enforcing those rules in New York. The RICE MACT isn't going to be treated in the same way. There's one provision in this rule which we very much disagree with, and as a result, we will not accept delegation of this rule. So compliance with this rule is between the source owner and EPA. It will not be covered in our permits. For CHP, it should be fairly simple. It's record keeping and reporting requirements, but this is a fairly complicated rule, basically because it's been revised 4 times in the last 4 years. There's a link at the bottom of this page to an EPA webpage. They have a number of fact sheets. The contact person is Melanie King. I believe she's in the Research Triangle Park office. And she has said in a number of presentations that I've listened to and via webinars, if you have questions, please call her. She acknowledges that this is fairly complicated. Now, CHP applications can be part of, or can enroll in demand response programs, whether it be the ISO or Con Ed or whatever. And it's because those units will have permits. If you have a CHP application in a facility and an emergency generator, emergency generators under New York State under our permitting rules are exempt, which means they're not covered under the permit. Where the CHP can operate in the demand response program, emergency generators, well, unless they're permitted, may not. So just makes complying with the Rice Act a little bit complicated, but you have to consider that the DEC's rule or definition of emergency generator, which is basically a generator which is used when the usual source of electricity is not available, is stricter than the definition in the Rice Act. And that's the basic reason why we're not going to accept delegation. As I said in the beginning, where NYState is encouraging and assisting with the deployment of CHP, we're the agency that wants to take credit for it. And I said one of our primary missions is to bring the state into attainment with the Ozone National Ambient Air Quality Standard. And the current standard is 75 parts per billion. We have modelers on staff that take a look at the emission profiles and sources and our mission inventories and our existing and future regulations to project, at what point the model says we would reach attainment with the Ozone National Ambient Air Quality Standard. And let's just assume for a second that let's say the modelers say we're within a couple parts per billion, let's 77 or 78 parts per billion. It's that point where we could turn to the CHP application. Let's say there are 14,000 megawatts of CHP applications in the state. One of the things that we might do is just say, all right, there's 14,000, we'll take credit for maybe half of them, just to be safe. So say there's 7,000 megawatts, and from that we estimate X amount of tons of reductions of nitrogen oxides, which would lead to a reduction in the generation of ozone. And what we would include as a weight of evidence that would be, we would believe that would be sufficient to bring the state into attainment, to bring the modeled value down to 75 or parts per billion or below. And we may include that in our state implementation plan as a means of actually completing or actually achieving the goal of meeting the standard. If for some reason that 14,000 or 7,000 megawatts of CHP were to dry up, we would be on the hook to come up with an alternative strategy to meet the ozone standard. The other option is a control strategy where we put permits or conditions in your permit basically saying that you're operating a CHP system, this is how it's designed to operate, this is how many emission reductions we're expecting from your facility. And, well, if you don't meet your obligation, not only can DEC come after you, but EPA can come after you. Of the two strategies, we're looking at the weight of evidence. It's less intrusive on facilities. So with that, I'll open the floor to questions.
Thanks, John. Once again, we have two microphones open. I see we have a taker. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Hello, John.
Hi.
Hello, John. David Aarons, Energy Spectrum.
Hi, Dave.
In regards to the Rice rules and their applicability for natural gas-fired CHP, can you kind of expound on what their requirements are for existing CHP?
On the Rice rule for existing?
Existing natural gas-fired
Yeah,
CHP.
I believe it's
Specific
record
amendments.
keeping. I don't think there's any emission control requirements that I'm aware of. But I would contact EPA because that rule's been changing quite a bit.
And so you will not be taking up the responsibility of looking at those regulatory requirements?
Not for that particular rule.
Okay, thank you.
Gotcha. I see.
Thank you. Tim
Lights are
White.
bright here.
Sorry, Tim White. I'm a student at Yale University. I'm wondering about, I have not heard anything yet, I may have missed it, but I'm kind of curious about municipal and county government, specifically with regard to DEC. One of the things that's come up is, at least maybe not in the context of New York State, but nationally, local and county regulations on fracking, and not to get into that, but just in
Which
terms,
I won't get into.
No, I'm just wondering in terms of local and county regulations, is there anything that sort of intersects or comes up in relation to CHP? And then also, a question I was wondering about that I should have asked before, I think you may have some knowledge on it, is simply wondering about I apologize, I should have written it down, I forgot what that is. I'm just curious about the...
I'm here if you think of it later. On the municipal, I'm not aware of any regulations that match that, but municipalities certainly can issue stricter regulations. They can't adopt any regulations that are less strict than the regulations that we've adopted.
Are you aware of any that have arisen so far? Okay.
No, I'm not.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Can't believe more people didn't have questions about DC regulations. I guess everybody has memorized them, and there's no reason to ask questions. No? I'm sure John is happy about that. We're going to kind of take a detour in the program here. We're going to take a short break at this point. And we will be coming back after that with the next presentation. I want to let everybody know that the slides that are going up will be on the Department of Public Service website as soon as we can get them up there. So anything that you've missed that's on these slides, you can go there, www.dps.gov. So they will be there. There will be the links to these people and to the proper contact people as have been identified on many of these slides. We're just trying to make it a little easier that way for you. So that said, we are going to take a short break now. Feel free, there's still some food in the break room. Network, and we will be back shortly. We'll have Dana and his chimes again for those that like that kind of thing. All right, thank you.